Welcome to TCC Online. We're glad you guys could join us today. Well, my name is Brennan. We have Brian with us, Brett, Mandy, and Mike. We're glad you guys are here. Would you worship along with us? Walking the wayside, lost on a lonely road. I was chasing the high life, trying to satisfy my soul. All the lies I believed in left me crying like the rain. Then I saw lightning from heaven, and I've never been the same. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a faith in Jesus. I am a child of love. I felt the sting of the fire, but I saw you in the flames. Just when I thought it was over, you brought me out of the grave. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a faith in Jesus. I am a child of love. Oh, yeah, yeah. I am a child of love. Oh, yeah, yeah. I am a child of love. Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate. Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate. I'm gonna climb a mountain. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom. I am a child of love. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I'm a child of love. Oh, yeah, yeah. I am a child of love. Oh, yeah, yeah. I am a child of love.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to TCC Online. My name is Ben, and let me just say thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend it with us here at TCC Online. So we have child dedication coming up this Mother's Day weekend, May 8th. If you want to get your child dedicated, connect with a chat host, and we will figure out how to make that happen for you. Also, if you are a student or you are an adult or a guardian of students, and they want to go to summer camp, we have summer camps coming up. Check out our website, tcconline.tv. Trust me, summer camps are an absolute blast, and it's going to be something that they remember for their entire lives. Maybe this is your first time checking us out here online. If that is the case, jump into the chat. We're going to drop a link. Click that link, fill out the form, and we will send you a gift because we want you to know that you're appreciated here at TCC. So with that said, let's jump into today's service.
The God who was, we worship the God who is, we worship the God who evermore will be. He opened the prison doors, He parted the raging sea. My God, He owns the victory. Oh, there's joy in the house of the Lord, there's joy in the house of the Lord today. We won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord, our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. Whoa, oh, we shout out your praise. We sing to the God who heals, we sing to the God who saves, we sing to the God who always makes a way. 'Cause He hung up on that cross, then He rose up from that grave. My God still rolling stones away. Yeah. There's joy in the house of the Lord, there's joy in the house of the Lord today. We won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord, our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. We were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. We were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord, there's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord, our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord, there's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord, our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet, we shout out your praise. We shout out your praise. There is joy in this house, there is joy in this house today. We shout out your praise, we shout out your praise, we shout out your praise.
The day my mother found out she was pregnant, my father told her to end the pregnancy or he would leave her. She chose me. He was gone before I took my first breath. As a single, uneducated mother in Villa Flores, Mama struggled every day to provide for us. As a young girl, I would think about my future. Would I ever become someone? The voices of my neighborhood said, "You're just a poor child. Your future is set. You will never become anything." I needed someone to change my future. I joined the compassion program at my church. Then, one day, I shared my dream with my sponsor. My sponsor's reply was simple. "Yaneli, I love you, and I believe in you." Sometimes you can't believe in a dream until someone else believes it with you. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. My name is Yaneli Suero, doctor, wife, mother, and a precious daughter of God. Right now, there are millions of children all over the world who are desperate for someone to believe in their future, just like I was. On this Compassion Sunday, you can tell a child in poverty you believe in their future. Sponsor a child today.
Well, I absolutely love Compassion International. I've been on many trips with them over the years, and my wife and I have sponsored many children over the years. In fact, Genesis, the child we sponsor, just turned 9. And I tell you, I think about her, and I've never met her, but what I know is I'm helping just in a small way to help set the course of her life in such a positive direction. I just want to encourage you, if you've never sponsored a child, Compassion is such an incredible organization that you can trust, and the money goes to these kids in needs, to these families in need. And so if you've never taken that step, I just want you to know across all of our churches, you have an opportunity to sponsor a child. And I also want you to know that when you give generously to TCC, we can help organizations like Compassion. I mean, all month they're hearing about our different impact partners. I just want you to know you're partnering just not for our churches in our local community, but you're helping make a difference around the world. So if you're not giving, take a step. If you're not giving online, sign up online. Decide a percentage that you're going to give to God in an act of worship, and give it joyfully. Give it with enthusiasm, knowing that you're partnering with God to impact the lives of people, well, in our local communities and around the world. Thank you for being part of what God is doing.
He bought me, and oh, his love for me, oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Realized he has ransomed his yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Well, it's so good to have all of you with us today. We're in part 2 of this series, Mosaic, Fractured, Not Forgotten. And well, have you thought about this question recently? Can it get any worse? Well, back in 2020, my wife and I were having this conversation, a conversation that we've actually had for years. And I would just, well, if you're married and you got kids, I would really lean into this because we were challenged years and years ago to have a plan for when our kids left the house, what we were going to do together. And so that's been something we've been talking about for years, what we want to do together when our kids leave and, well, we got more time and something that, well, keeps us just journeying life together. So one of the things that we talked about is, well, starting a little business. So we did that in 2020. You see, we love going to craft shows together. My wife's creative. I'm creative. I love working out in my wood shop. And so we decided to start a little woodworking business. And we're so excited to do that together, 2020. And then 2021 hit. And lumber futures in 1 year spiked 571%. You read that right, 571%. Now, to be fair, I kind of re-looked at the numbers and I said, well, that was from 2020 to 2021. What was a percentage increase from 2020 to 2022? I want to be fair. Well, that's just 320%. That's all. Can it get any worse? The price of chicken wings, if you love chicken wings, who doesn't? Price of chicken wings have gone up 41% in 1 year, and I love coffee. It's my number one go-to drink, but I'm talking about good coffee, and coffee in 1 year has increased 72%. Can it get any worse? We all know it can, and we all know it probably will, and that's where we're going to go in our time together today. Now, to catch you up, in part one, I introduced you to a guy named Xerxes, or the Bible calls him Ahasuerus. Xerxes was the king of Persia, and Persia during this time period where we're looking at this story across all of Mosaic, Persia is a world-leading power, and Xerxes throws this 7-day feast, and the wine flowed, everyone was drunk, and then one day Xerxes calls in his wife, Queen Vashti, because he wanted her to parade in front of everyone. She told him no, and you don't tell kings no. Xerxes was furious, enraged. He gathered around him all of his advisors to go, what should we do? And he made a decree, and he banished Queen Vashti, and he went out to look for someone better. Now, several years elapsed, and all of a sudden he went into motion to find, a new queen. And there we're introduced to, a girl named Esther. It's actually a book in the Bible. It's called Esther. And the thing about Esther, she had a pretty difficult, storyline. You see, Esther was a Jewish girl living in exile, living in the Persian Empire. She was living in a foreign land, in a foreign culture, around foreign religious practices. And she has a pagan name. Her name, Esther, is actually tethered to the Babylonian star god, Ishtar. And her parents died. We don't know how her parents died, but they died. And her cousin Mordecai, who we'll talk a lot about today, brings her into his family. And she actually gets forced to enter in this process for Xerxes to find his new queen. And all of a sudden, she becomes queen. But remember, this is not some Cinderella story. I meant the word forced. She wasn't asked. She didn't get to decide. And the process was vile. And now she's queen. And guess what she knows? She knows the story of Queen Vashti. And the one day Queen Vashti told Xerxes no, and what happened to her. My encouragement as we make our way through, this part today and, parts 3, 4, and 5, there's something that I just need you to lean into because it's kind of the powerful part of the story of Esther. You see, I want to encourage you to see God move in the unseen. Because the entire story of Esther, God isn't mentioned not once. In fact, in the entire story of Esther, there's no religious imagery. It's just not there. In fact, in the story of Esther, there's a whole lot of drinking and sex and murder and plot twists. But you're going to start seeing God move in unseen ways. And just maybe, you'll start seeing how God is moving in the unseen in your life. Let's step into the story. Esther is now queen. And during the time, Mordecai, her cousin, who brought her into his family when her parents died, was sitting at the king's gate. Now, we have no clue of why he was sitting there, but that day, he just happened to be sitting there, and he overheard a conversation from Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to, assassinate Xerxes. Now, this was a common practice back then. In fact, Xerxes actually died, because the captain of his guard and, a eunuch in his service conspired together, and they had Xerxes killed. It's actually how he died. And so this happened a lot. And so Mordecai, we're told, he found out about this plot. Because he was sitting there overhearing the conversation. He told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king. And, she gave credit to Mordecai. And when the report was, we're told, investigated and found out to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. Now, we got to pause here because, impaling was a well, the preferred method of death for the Persians. I had never really researched impaling, and to be honest with you, I'm not going to take any time to describe it because it's horrific on every level. In fact, historians believe that actually crucifixion was a next step out of impaling because they considered crucifixion to be a more humane way to die than impaling. But the Persians had perfected impaling people, and well, these two were impaled. And all of this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. So it looks like in the story, it's actually gotten a lot better. It's a pinnacle moment. It's like, oh, Esther's queen, and she protects the king, and Mordecai gets credit. But as soon as it feels like, oh, it's a Cinderella story, we'll enter into a guy named Haman. Now, we don't know what Haman did, but he did something that, Xerxes elevates Haman to, higher than any other noble. I mean, he lifts him up into a really high position in the Persian Empire. And we're told that, all the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman. Why? For the king had commanded this concerning him. Now, we all know when a king commands something, you do what the king tells you to do. But can you feel the tension surge? Can you feel the music track shift? Can you feel the emotion? You know what comes next, even if you've never heard this story. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. In fact, all the royal officials at the king's gate asked the question. Maybe it's the question you're asking right now. Well, why? Why didn't Mordecai bow down and honor Haman? Why didn't he do it? And so they asked that question. In fact, day after day, they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore, they told Haman about it. Finally, they had to tell Haman, hey, Haman, there's this guy named Mordecai. He's not doing this, to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated. Of course, they knew that answer, for he had told them he was a Jew. And now that is a first clue of why Mordecai refused to bow down to Haman. And when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Again, there's this common theme throughout the entire story of Esther that has everything to do with anger and fury and rage. And Haman becomes enraged because Mordecai, a Jew, won't bow down and honor him. And having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Did you get what he's saying there? He discovers who Mordecai's people are. And he goes from just wanting to kill Mordecai to killing all of them. So again, we got to ask the why question. Why is there so much vitriol between Haman and Mordecai? I mean, why doesn't Mordecai bow to Haman? And why does Haman not only want to kill Mordecai, now wants to wipe out all of the Jews? Well, why? Well, there's some clues in the story that I just want to kind of surface because it helps to paint the story of why. And the why is hundreds and hundreds of years in the making. You see, what we do know is Haman is an Agagite. And that will make sense more in a moment. And we know that Mordecai is a Benjamite. Now, the Agagites were tethered to a group of people called the Amalekites, and the Benjamites, Benjamin was a tribe of, Israel. And there's a lot of deep-seated hatred between the Amalekites and the Israelites. You see, when Israel wasn't even a nation yet, they were just a group of people leaving captivity, leaving Egypt. What we read about is the Amalekites came from behind. I mean, these are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Israelites leaving Egypt. And the Amalekites were coming behind and killing the stragglers. Now ask the question, who would be at the back? Who would be the stragglers? Who would be the slower people? I mean, the elderly, young kids, women who were expecting, right? Like you start to think who were in the back. And the Amalekites, one by one, were just killing the Israelites. And God was furious and cursed the Amalekites. Cursed them. So years later, King Saul went to, wipe out the Amalekites, who their king at that point was a guy named King Agag, which was where the Agagites come from. They're all one group of people. So Saul comes, wipes out as many Amalekites as he can, but he doesn't obey God. He honestly does not choose to kill King Agag. Samuel finds out about it, and guess what Samuel the prophet does? Samuel kills King Agag. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years in the making. They hated each other. This is like the good old-fashioned Hatfield and McCoys. Don't you think Mordecai knew his family history? Yes. Don't you think Haman knew his family history? Yes. And now we start to understand why Mordecai refused to bow down and honor Haman. And now we understand why Haman wants to wipe him out. Haman's in a position, almost the second most powerful position in the known world. Xerxes had elevated him, and now Haman can get back to all of those people and their God and what their God had done to the Agagites and the Amalekites and what their God and their people, Samuel, had done to King Agag. Now Haman can get his revenge. Instead, we're told, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews. How can we wipe them all out throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes? And in the 12th year, this would have been the 5th year of Queen Esther's reign, King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan. Now, the month of Nisan is like our March and April. We're told that the pur, that is, the lot, was cast. Now, it was very common in that Persian culture where they would have painted dice and they would roll them, and they would just kind of determine, the fates would just determine what decision to make. And that sounds kind of interesting. It sounds like gambling to us. But in fact, in our book of Acts, actually the apostles went to, fill the open spot where Judas hung himself. They needed to find another apostle, and so they casted lots. It's the same process to determine who they were going to pick next. And so they, casted these lots in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Now, to understand their calendar and what the time span looks like, what we know is they're in the month of Nisan, which is March to April. And when they cast the lots, it landed on Adar, which is February to March. So they had almost 11 months to prepare, 11 months to get ready, 11 months to, kill all the Jews. And you think about, all the Jews, now they have 11 months to worry about their impending death. They have 11 months to feel completely out of control. But God has 11 months to do what God is planning on doing. Then Haman said to Xerxes, there's a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws like Queen Vashti did. Remember what you did to her? It is not in the king's best interest. Can you feel Haman just kind of buttering up the king, saying, hey, it's not in your best interest to tolerate them. So if it pleases the king, let a decree. Remember, decree. We looked at this in part 1. Once a king enacted a decree, not even the king could change his own decree. He said, hey, if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. And I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury. How much is this? 375 tons. What Haman did was significant because he knew one of Xerxes' concerns would be, well, if we wipe out all the Jews, well, that's tax money. Oh, how am I going to figure this financial thing out? And so Haman wanted to be proactive and just wipe out the financial obstacle. And so he came up with a massive number, and he said, hey, here you go, 375 tons. Will that do it? And so the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Can you feel it? And then Xerxes said, keep the money. Keep it. I don't need it. Don't want it. Don't worry about it. And do with the people as you please. And then what does Xerxes and Haman do? What every good Persian does. They sat down to drink. I mean, that's just what they did. A whole lot of drinking. But the city of Susa was bewildered. Now, why do you think the entire city of Susa was bewildered? Again, they knew their family history. The Persians kept annals of history of what took place. They loved their rich history, and they all would have known. Cyrus the Great, who conquered Babylon, who established Persia as a world empire, they all knew that he alone liberated the Jews, looked at the Jews and said, now you can go home. The Jews that were in captivity, exiled for 70 years underneath Babylon, now Cyrus said, hey, you can go home. It was Cyrus that made a decree that they could start rebuilding their temple. And it was Darius who oversaw the completion of the temple. It was Darius that raised up a guy named Daniel to a high position. You see, there was this good relationship between the Persians and the Jews, and that's why they were all bewildered. They had no idea, like, why now? Why is Xerxes okaying their complete, mass genocide? I mean, that's what it was. Complete annihilation of a group of people. That's why they were bewildered. They couldn't fathom why now this decree has come out. And for 11 months, everyone focused on what was to come. And you just think about Mordecai, and you think about Esther, and we really don't know the depth of their spiritual faith. Because again, in the book of Esther, God's never mentioned. But you have to think, did they ever wonder, hey, God, do you see what I see? Hey, God, are you even here? You see, you think about a moment like this and what Mordecai and Esther were facing, and maybe you're facing something significant now. And it's so easy in just life where we look around us and we're great at seeing the impossible in front of us. But what we have to keep coming back to is God sees that which is possible. Mordecai was completely beyond himself. We're told in the text that, he just started wailing and grieving very publicly. I mean, everyone around Susa knew that this guy was in a bad place. He had put on sackcloth and wiped his body with ashes, and he was so grieved by what he had caused. We're told that Queen Esther actually sent him clothing, and he refused the clothing. And so she sent, one of her eunuchs, one of the servants within, her little place in the palace. His name was Hathach. And so she sent him to figure out what was going on. And so when Hathach came to Mordecai told him the entire story, everything that he'd done, and Haman and the decree, all of it. He said, hey, this is everything. Then Mordecai looks at Esther and says, looks at Hathach and goes, you got to go back to Esther and go and tell her, you got to instruct her to go to the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. I mean, this was the only shot Mordecai had. I mean, this is a long shot. And what percentage chance do you think Mordecai thought when he sent Hathach to Esther to have her go plead with the king. What percentage of chance do you think Mordecai actually thought he had of the king changing his mind? 0. Because everyone knew kings couldn't change their decree. Everyone knew that once a decree was made, it was final. I mean, Mordecai knew that. It wasn't shocking to him. He knew that there was 0% chance that this was going to end any other way than all of the Jews being slaughtered. You see, even in your impossible, even in your 0%, God, everything is possible. For God, it was more like 100%. Well, the story goes on, and we're told that all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches a king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law. You see, Esther replies through Hathach to Mordecai and just says, hey, you just got to know, this is how this queen thing works. It works for anyone in the empire, but it also applies to me that, well, just not anyone can just approach the king. She goes on and she goes, well, that they'd be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their life. She's like, if you're not summoned and you approach the king, if he doesn't raise his scepter, you're going to die. And then she adds this one piece of information. He goes, but 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. Hey, Mordecai, the king hasn't even wanted to see me for 30 days. The king hasn't wanted me to be around for 30 days. The king has wanted nothing to do with me for 30 days, but yet you want me to go and plead for all the Jews when the decree has been made? There's a 0% possibility of the king ever going to change his decree. And Mordecai sends a message through Hathach back to Esther and goes, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. You see, the king doesn't know that Esther is a Jew. Mordecai had actually instructed Esther to keep that a secret, to keep that hidden. He goes, hey, you're not protected. Think about Queen Vashti. She told the king no once. What do you think is going to happen to you? And Mordecai goes forward, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. And we're not sure what Mordecai meant by that. Maybe he meant that maybe this is spiritual, that God would show up, maybe. But again, God's never mentioned. Or maybe this is just wishful, hopeful, optimistic thinking, going, well, just maybe if you don't, maybe the Jews will be saved. And maybe another place, another way. But no, Esther. That you and your father's family will perish. That will happen. And then what Mordecai says next. Again, when we start thinking about how God moves in the unseen, how God works behind the scenes, how God is behind the curtain, moving and shifting and working and whispering, I think this is one of these moments. Mordecai pauses. And you can almost just feel there's this whisper. Again, it's not in the text. I'm just saying what he says starts to shift the story from staring at 0% to maybe, just maybe, there's a chance. This is what Mordecai says. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Hey, Esther, maybe the whole reason you're queen is for such a time as this. Hey, Esther, Maybe you being forced out of the home and into this queen process was for such a time as this. Hey, Esther, just maybe your parents dying and you being brought into my home was for such a time as this. Hey, Esther, you having this pagan name for such a time as this. Hey, Esther, you being in exiles for such a time as this. Hey, Esther, maybe all of this is for such a time as this. Hey, Esther, you're impossible. Maybe it's possible. What's your such a time as this? Even in your impossible. What's your such a time as this? What's the impossible in front of you that you're just saying there's just no way? The hurt is so deep, there's just no way. The betrayal is so relevant, there's just no way. You look into your future and there's no way. What is your impossible right now? And I just want you to know that just maybe, God is saying to you, God is whispering to you, maybe God is screaming at you, for such a time as this, now is a time. So stop looking at your impossible and start looking that all things are possible with God. God has mastered taking our impossible and doing the possible. What's your such a time as this? Don't stare at what you can't do, what you can't become, what's too big in front of you. Don't keep staring at your impossible. Start looking at a God that makes all things possible. What feels like 0% to you and me. So easy for God. In part one, we gave an opportunity for everyone to take one of these little glass mosaic tiles and to write their initials on and to drop them in baskets, or for those of you who are connecting digitally, to drop your initials in the chat, and well, we did it for you. Maybe you missed part one, or maybe you just hesitated to walk up to write your initials. But maybe right now you need to. And so we just wanted to give another opportunity. If you weren't able to last week, for whatever reason. Across all of our physical campuses, to walk up during this song and write your initials. And when you drop it in the basket, just say, hey, God, I know what my impossible is, but with you, everything is possible. When you drop it in, just take a deep breath and go, God, I know. I see my impossible, but I know with you, it's all possible. For those of you connecting digitally, type in your initials. We'll do it for you. But you got to hold on to the truth. Even when you think there is no way, with God leading, there's always a way. Let me pray. Lord, I just pray over every single person. You know what their impossible is right now. You know what they're staring at. You know that crushing weight upon their life. You know the 0% that's circling around in their minds. And Lord, I just pray, maybe just in the moment, you just breathe, such a time as this. You just whisper, such a time as this. Maybe you shout, such a time as this. That's in moments like this, where we stop staring at our impossible and we fixate our eyes on you, a God that makes all things possible, a God that works all things for the good, for those who love him, love you, and are called according to your purpose. In your name I pray. Amen.
Christ is my firm foundation, and the rock on which I stand. when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. So I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, 'cause I built my life on Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. He won't. He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. No, he won't.
And that is our service for today. I hope that you got something from the message. I hope that the music lifted you up. And remember, if you're going through a hard time or just you need somebody to talk to, always reach out to us here at TCC and the TCC Online campus. We'd happy just to talk with you, be a friend, and maybe point you in the right direction of something that you need. Remember, we're one church right where you are.